You know, there are tons of horror movies that people just absolutely fell in love with the first time they saw them. And then there are other films that had to fight and scratch and claw to survive. Movies that were misunderstood, rejected, and written off as failures. Only later, years later, to become absolute legends. In 1982, The Thing was released to confusion, backlash, and outright hostility. Critics hated it. It flopped at the box offices. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. And its director, John Carpenter, watched one of his most personal and favorite films get absolutely buried. But today, The Thing is considered one of, if not the greatest horror film ever made. So how did that happen? What went wrong in 1982? And why did it take decades for the world to finally understand and recognize The Thing for the masterpiece it is? This isn't just the story of a movie and the controversies and the theories behind it. It's the story of how paranoia, timing, culture, and trust can decide a film's fate. I'm Chase with AV Pop Culture, and welcome to Outpost 31, where we're going to dig into the facts, the secrets, and the theories behind John Carpenter's classic, The Thing. Trust no one. Isolated corner of the world, a group of men are about to take on an enemy they can't see, can't trust, and can't kill. An alien entity that can perfectly mimic anyone, anything, including themselves.
You know, this creature is in your midst, and he's imitating either one or all of us. Who's human and who isn't?
But how did a low-budget, nihilistic horror movie about paranoia and trust issues in the snow in the dark corners of Antarctica go on to become a horror classic?
As you watched it, it was so frightening that my popcorn flew out of my hands.
This is the story of how The Thing went from a box office disaster to a horror legend. And along the way, we'll dig into its production nightmares, Rob Bottin's insane effects work, Carpenter's visual strategy, and yes, the endless debates over that ambiguous ending.
How are we going to end this
How
thing?
are we going to end this story?
I thought your ending line, I thought this entire ending of the movie was incredible.
In the frozen wastelands of Antarctica, paranoia spreads faster than frostbite, and John Carpenter's The Thing is one of the most terrifying horror films ever made, and it hinges largely on that paranoia, that isolation, and that sense of not being able to trust the person next to you and them not being able to trust you. That's part of the reason why 4 decades after its release, The Thing is celebrated as a landmark in horror cinema, a masterpiece of practical effects, atmosphere, and ambiguity that still has us talking just like this today. But where did it all start? Well, it started with a story, and it started with a monster.
They opened the door and he's right there. I went nuts. I went crazy.
John Carpenter's The Thing gets its foundation from a 1938 novella called Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, which introduced a shape-shifting alien that kind of set the stage for Cold War paranoia before the Cold War even started. The themes of infiltration, of wondering if the person next to you is the enemy in disguise, that whole paranoia, that got its start right there in that novella, and we definitely take it to the next level in the 1982 version of this story.
I guess you're okay. Put that on and watch them.
Now, our film, the 1982 The Thing, was actually a remake of a 1951 film, The Thing from Another World, that also had some of the same foundations in that novella, but instead of a shapeshifter, we got a lumbering plant monster.
He was a kind of a vegetable that could reproduce various life forms, but he wasn't the imitator, the creature that could imitate any life form from the original story.
Carpenter loved the film, though, and clips from it appear in the 1978 classic Halloween, one of my favorite movies of all time as well, when the kids are watching TV on Halloween night. Universal initially planned a remake for the 70s, but they kind of held it off and planned to revisit the material later with more of a modern sensibility. And because of that, Tobe Hooper was actually attached initially because he is just coming off of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but his take on that and just Tobe Hooper overall was considered maybe a little too offbeat, and eventually Carpenter, coming off of Halloween's massive success, was given the gig, though it was reluctant at that time. Carpenter wasn't initially a big fan of doing remakes,
And we started writing from scratch and started all over again.
but this one kind of pulled him in because he was such a big fan of the 1951 film and the novella.
Who's human and who isn't? And that kind of an idea really fascinated me. So we went, in that sense, back to that idea.
So with the script greenlit, pre-production was ready to start. Screenwriter Bill Lancaster, yes, Burt Lancaster's son, he's the one who shaped the script, and his draft stayed closer to Campbell and that novella than the Hawks film. Alien is a parasite, not a man in a rubber suit, obviously. Much more on that later. Carpenter insisted on serious ensemble tension rather than camp. He didn't want it to be campy and fun. He wanted the paranoia, and boy, did he get it. Now, as far as the casting goes, you might be surprised to find out that Kurt Russell was cast last. I mean, he was a frequent Carpenter collaborator, obviously, but many actors were considered for the role. You had Nick Nolte that was considered for the role, Jeff Bridges, even Christopher Walken was considered for the role. Can you imagine Christopher Walken as MacReady? That one is hard for me.
We just looked at every good actor we could find.
John was trying to cast the role of MacReady, because I wasn't involved with the movie. And he was casting the movie and had some of the other roles cast pretty much, when he was not finding what he wanted for MacReady.
Kurt Russell wanted to play the lead, and he was the kind of linchpin.
But Carpenter really wanted just ordinary men to be in this situation. No glamorous heroes, nobody that looked like they rolled off the Hollywood pretty production line. He wanted to really build Outpost 31, and that is what he did, because he got a cast of characters that not only acted their asses off in this film, they really fit their roles. You buy in immediately, and that is important to a story like this.
And assembled a great cast.
Set designers for this thing really wanted to help capture that isolation kind of feeling. This wasn't all filmed on a backlot. This was filmed in the cold, in the snow, in Alaska and in British Columbia, where they first built a set. They built the whole outpost and then burned it so that it would have that charred look for later scenes, which is crazy. Now, some of the interiors were refrigerated on Universal sound stages to get actors' breath visible. Temperatures dropped so low that the actors stayed in costume all day. They sprayed some moisture in the air so that we get the breath that we see. But a lot of that stuff that's outside, that is the actors cold in the snow on tight production deadlines and freezing their butts off. That adds a token of realism to this that you just cannot get doing things with CGI or digital backgrounds or all of that kind of stuff. Because of that, though, production was kind of tough. As you can imagine, you have Juneau, Alaska exteriors in this. You have the British Columbia situation. The conditions were brutal. They had to get there with snowmobiles that often broke down. Visibility dropped to zero in whiteout conditions a lot of times. But Carpenter insisted on the isolation. He insisted on the realism. Cast members couldn't fly home easily. They lived together in trailers. They kept their costumes on, as I said. All of those snowy aerial shots and everything, that is real. And when you just get on location, it is much easier to assume or assimilate the character that you are becoming rather than go home and get comfortable and everything. They lived the gimmick, so to speak, and it showed in the final product. Now, I said this all started with a monster, and it definitely does. The Thing, all of his creations, his variations, his assimilations, its assimilations, if you want to say that, were in the hands of a just turned 22-year-old protege of Rick Baker, Rob Bottin. Now, Rob Bottin had just come off doing all of the creature work for a Roger Corman film, Humanoids from the Deep, one of my favorites of all time. But he convinced Carpenter that he could design a creature that could look like anything, which seems like an insane thing to try to undertake.
He came in with a wild concept, which is that the Thing can look like anything. It doesn't look like one monster, it looks like anything. And out of this changing shape, this imitation, comes all the creatures throughout the universe that the Thing has ever imitated, and it uses these various forms.
Now, Rob Bottin famously, as a young man, worked himself nearly to death into the hospital for sure on this film, but everything still stands up today because they used such groundbreaking and practical effects. I know that sounds weird to say, but sometimes you just have to use your head and whatever's laying around, whether it's bubblegum, KY jelly, or in some cases, like with the Alaskan Malamutes, they used real dogs, but also mechanical doubles. They used everything else so that they could find, from latex to legitimately bubblegum, melted plastic, KY jelly, animatronic jaws, slime, mayonnaise, anything they could use to get the effect, because all that matters is what you see right there on screen. But man, this still has some scenes that shock audiences today, and because of the film stock and the lighting, something we'll get into later, and because of how these effects were created, they still sell an audience today. It doesn't matter that the film is over 40 years old. That doesn't mean that Carpenter was always buying it. When Bottin went to him to say, hey, we're going to do this with puppets, we're going to make this spider thing, we're going to make this really happen on camera without cutting away, we're going to show it, Carpenter looked at him famously and basically deadpanned, you got to be effing kidding me, because we can't do this. But they definitely did do this. And that also leads us right into the famous blood test scene. Now, this scene is one of the most copied scenes in all of cinema. You see versions of this in all kinds of movies, from The Faculty to wherever. You're going to see a version of the blood test scene. And a lot of people do not know that MacReady, that Kurt Russell, his hand that is holding the Petri dish in this is a prosthetic hand. So when you check this out, you're going to see, from now on, you're going to see how still that hand stays, because they didn't want any kind of injury to come to him. And you had the sudden leap of blood that had to be done with pressurized tubing. So you just can't risk the actors in that situation. But that whole time, so that it didn't stick out when the effect actually happens, they had the prosthetic hand the whole time for the whole test, because it could be easier to tell if you switched it getting ready for the explosion, so to speak. If you really go frame by frame, you can see Kurt Russell anticipate it as he starts to flinch before it explodes, but it happens so fast. But that is such a cool little detail that even I never picked up on until I found out about it, and that means it was really good filmmaking. But Bottin definitely sacrificed this 12 to 14 hour days minimum. He slept on set. He stayed at the studio. all kinds of stuff. He sculpted these things, and eventually it did end up with him in the hospital. Like he says, he doesn't do that anymore, but man, it is hard to argue with the results.
And I ended up, working so hard that I ended up in the hospital. But since then, I've wised up and, I don't do that anymore.
Now, being a filmmaker myself, particularly horror films, low budget, DIY, in some cases we've had to get by. One thing I am fascinated about as someone who films the movies and edits the movies that they work on for the most part is the cinematography of this film, and that all plays a part that with why it looks so good today, especially with the film stock they used, the cameras they used. They used Panavision Panaflex Gold with anamorphic lenses for the wide, snowy exteriors. It really increases that feel of isolation with that big scope and that wide kind of feeling, sets you real small in the frame. But when they're indoors, they use long focal lengths. You got Dean Cundy on this movie, and he definitely knows what he's doing when it comes to horror films. But they also picked a film stock that is part of the reason that this movie looks so good and part of the reason it holds up so well today, especially to things like 4K restorations. They used a Kodak Eastman stock that was actually pretty common at the time, but specifically picked for this movie. It was Kodak Eastman 5247-100. Why did they pick this? Well, it was pretty common to be used at that time, particularly for films that had a lot of practical effects in them. It was known to have very clean, tight grain and a very high contrast look. That plays into how they designed everything. So because you have a very fine grain, that helps, believe it or not, the effects still look good today instead of like looking downgraded, dingy. All of the detail is still held by that real tight grain and the high contrast that gives a big range from lights to dark. All of that plays into the feel and why this movie stands the test of time the way it does. And a lot of that is people don't even think about it. But this one definitely had Dean Cundy's touch behind the camera. That detailed gore, the crisp, sharp look, all of that is there. It had a blue hue to this film. When you shoot with it, it really played up the blues and was really high contrast. So you're going to see a lot of like fire in the movie. You're going to see very harsh transitions between darks and lights in this blue hue that goes over the snow that Cundy leaned into with lighting to kind of give it more of a cold feel. All of that was present in the film stock and then, just kind of enhanced with the way they lit and shot the film. That adds a lot to it because moving in and out of shadow and darkness can be very unsettling because you can't see what's coming around the corner. And then that whole feel of the snow and the isolation with the blue light and the blue cool hues brought in the film, that kind of makes you feel the cold, feel the environment that the actors were feeling out there at the outpost.
My favorite thing in this whole picture is to be able to be up here in a location like this and just be able to shoot up here. It's unbelievably fantastic.
Now, obviously, if you have seen this movie and you're a fan of this movie, and obviously you are because you are here, you know that MacReady, that Kurt Russell, is the anchor to this story. We're going to get into the theories about all of this, who infected who, all that stuff. It's coming because I'm going to tell you who the thing really is. But Kurt Russell anchors the story as MacReady. His everyman stoicism contrasts with all the madness around him. From the moment we're introduced to him, he's playing chess there. You get an idea of the kind of man he is. You get the idea that he's not going to take anything. I mean, he fries the computer with his whiskey because the computer cheats, which is interesting because, in fact, the computer does cheat. The chess moves in this are not possible. And yet the computer declares itself a winner of this game, which is kind of interesting when you think about it later, maybe a foreshadow of not being able to win this game. But he handles that like any good guy like him would, and he gives the computer a winning little drink and goes about his merry way. But he is meant to be the absolute contrast to everyone else, and maybe, just maybe, the perfect foil for the Thing, because the Thing, in some ways, I believe, is repulsed by him and admires him for how he is in this movie. The other big actor in this movie, and they are all great, by the way, but Keith David as Childs. Keith David is one of my favorite, most underrated actors ever. Also a frequent collaborator with Carpenter. But here he makes his feature film debut. Later he's with him in They Live, and we'll get into that in another video. But he is very confrontational. He has energy that kind of sparks the film's final ambiguity. He's a good guy. He can be jovial, but he's also puts off that air of, don't mess with him. And I like it. Almost like an anti-hero. Both of these guys would be like a great buddy cop anti-hero situation. And that's kind of what forms in here. It's perfect that they are the last two alive. Now, are they both it? Is neither it? Is one of them it? Don't worry, we're going to get there. Wilford Brimley, though, in this film, playing Blair, terrifying once isolated. His paranoia breaks down into dread. He works the model on the computer that finds out that they've only got about 27,000 hours if the Thing gets out of here before the entire world is assimilated. So just roughly over 3 years, he's got this computer that's forecasting this out, which would be far-fetched then, pretty easy now. But it's at that point that he realizes that he cannot let the Thing get out of there. And the Thing's big goal is to get out of there. And I think that plays into how it got there, because I'm not so sure that the ship that's out there belongs to the Thing. Maybe the Thing just caught a ride, and that's what it's trying to do, is catch another ride out of here. The score in this film, too, you heard a little bit at the beginning. It's minimalist pulses. It helps set the tone with this cast of characters that I admit can sometimes, if you're a new viewer to this film, get confusing because you have so many men. You're like, where are they? Where is this guy? Where is that guy? That is exactly part of what he wanted to do with this. Where did this guy go? Where did that guy go? You're not trusting anyone. You're not sure where anyone is in the movie. It's very hard to keep up with, and that has led to so many fan theories over the years because of what is going on or what's not going on. Whose shadow is that? Whose shadow is this? Did this person get assimilated first? Did the dog lick them over here? Did he drink kerosene? Is there a light in his eye, not in his eye, which Dean Cundy first leaned into and then later retract on that actually didn't mean anything. Does this person have breath? Does that person have breath? Well, the release of the 4K kind of blew that out of the water because now you can see Child's breath at the end of the movie. Don't worry, we're going to get there. I'm getting ahead of myself. But you have a lot of great performances in this. You've got Brimley's axe meltdown where he is not going to let them out of there. He pulls out the gun. He would rather kill them all than let this thing get out of there and destroy the world. Of course, they don't know that at that time. You have big confrontations from Childs. You've got MacReady's monologues. It is all there, and it just feels like it continues to spiral in on itself and just ratchet up the tension and the paranoia to a fever pitch at the end. This is going to be pretty explosive. All right, I promised you that we were going to get here. We're going to get to some theories, and we're going to kind of go over the pros and cons of those theories in the movie. And I'm sure I'll make some friends, win friends, and influence people over here. And over here, I'm sure that I'm going to make some people angry. But first, I'm not going to give you my thoughts on it. I am just going to lay it out there the way I see it, straight down the middle, pros and cons. So let's get to those theories and let's figure out exactly who is the Thing. All right. go ahead and open your non-kerosene whiskey bottle and stay with me because we're about to get into it right now. The theory number 1, MacReady is the thing. Well, let's check out the evidence on this. He's calm. His calm acceptance. We've got the gasoline bottle theory. All of that kind of stuff. You say, oh, he's so calm. He's accepted it. You know it's him at the end. You have the torn clothes that I believe were a setup. We'll get out of my... But you have the torn clothes. You have some circumstantial evidence. He is alone several different times. You have situational evidence that looks pretty bad in some ways. But really, the whole bottle thing, I hate to tell you, Carpenter denies that 100%. Categorically denies the gasoline bottle thing. That is based on a lot of circumstantial evidence and just kind of fans putting things in there. So it's largely fan invented, and Carpenter denies it. And that kind of hinges, that is kind of one of the big things that people hang their hat on. So some evidence, he's calm, he's collected, you've got some circumstantial evidence, I'll give you that. Theory B is that Childs is the thing. Well, evidence is the less visible breath, but the problem here is that with the 4K, we can see his breath again. And I got to tell you early on in the movie, you have other people who are the thing and we see their breath. So that one kind of is destroyed because the thing assimilates you perfectly. Right down to your thoughts, your feelings, your taste buds, your lungs, everything else. That's the reason that we have a heart attack in this movie. It assimilated a bad heart. So you have to keep in mind that it assimilates everything perfectly. We see other people who are obviously the thing and have been assimilated. We see them breathing in the movie. We see their breath. And as a filmmaker, I can tell you that Childs, his back is to the light source. That makes it harder to see. But now with the 4K restoration, you can see his breath. So that's a problem. The eye light thing is also a problem because Dean Cundey put that out there to start with, and then they've backtracked on it and said that's not it. And you see different cases of the eye thing. You can't go with the eye thing. All right. So again, lighting continuity, all that kind of stuff. It's circumstantial evidence. That's weaknesses. Then you have the next theory, which is both are human and both are just doomed. This is the nobody gets out alive theory. And this one fits Carpenter's nihilism and his look at this movie. I'm going to tell you that right now. He wanted a bleak ending. That would be the bleakest of the endings. None of my business, but that would be the bleakest. The problem with that's just a little too neat. And pointless in some ways, though he kind of wanted it to be a little pointless. But that one's just a little too neat for me. I don't know about that. Then there is the final fourth theory, and that is that both of them are the thing. This is the cosmic horror reading of this movie that all humanity is already lost. Now, this has a bunch of huge weaknesses, and I think this is the weakest possibility of them all because this undermines the whole character drama that we went through in this movie. Not only that, the thing would know itself. It would know itself. So that just doesn't make sense. Like the thing would recognize the thing. It would know itself. So I just that never made sense to me because like why? Like it'd be like cool, high five, bro. It's us. I'm not buying that one for 1 second, and it undermines the whole story. So I don't buy that one. The fan favorite here is the other theory is the gasoline bottle. Again, we kind of went over that. People say that twist explains MacReady's laugh. Carpenter denies it, okay? But I could definitely see that because there is no distinction in his JB whiskey bottles and all of the Molotov cocktails that they are throwing. So I could definitely see that as a possibility. But here's the thing again. The thing assimilates you perfectly, including your thoughts, your intelligences, your taste buds. It would know you don't drink gasoline. It would know the smell of gasoline because childs would know it. So that shoots holes in that theory 100%. So there's not a really clean way to look at this. And I think that kind of leaves it open for the interpretation that Carpenter wanted. I think he knows exactly what he was doing with that. He does say that he knows, and then he'll renege on it. I think he just likes to keep people talking. Let's be honest. In the end, the true horror is that we don't know, and we may never know except for the fact that I know. Now, one thing he did say is he always meant MacReady to be human. Okay, there's all kinds of things that could point to Childs that we didn't even talk about. There's the whole jacket thing. He's definitely wearing a different jacket. There's all kinds of stuff like that. But I actually think that it doesn't have anything to do with the jacket. I don't think it has anything to do with the breath. But I believe that neither of them were the thing. John Carpenter insisted he wanted basically he wanted an everyman hero. He wanted a person to stand against the thing. That's MacReady. He kept MacReady clean. MacReady is clean. He never was the thing. He's not the thing. He is the most unlikely to be the thing. The only other thing more unlikely is that they're both the thing, because they are the type of guys who would go down with the ship. And I think that they both understand that it could have blown up and could be completely destroyed, but they can never trust one another enough to try to get out of there alive. And you have bred this paranoia this long that neither of them will allow the other one to get out of there, because they are the type that will go down with the ship in order to save everyone else. And I think that is probably the most likely. And as I talk about it, see, this is what's so great about this movie, because as I talk about it, I want to talk myself into saying neither of them were the thing, and they're just ready to go down with the ship for all of mankind. And in the end, that's what makes this movie so great. That's why the legacy is still going today, because you are free to debate about it amongst yourselves. But if your thought isn't one of those two, it's definitely wrong. Now, despite all of this good stuff, it's not all great. The Thing was a failure when it came out at the box office, released in June of 1982, just weeks after E.T., and critics trashed it. E.T. was setting the world on fire. It was so good, family friendly. Critics called this thing instant junk, a barf bag type movie. Audiences wanted hope. They wanted that happiness, that family friendly version of Spielberg's E.T. And Spielberg is my favorite all-time director. Carpenter is my second. I love them both. But they just didn't want this bleak outlook. Whether one of them was the thing or neither of them was the thing, or both of them, that is so bleak. The ending is so bleak. And so the result is $19 million on a $15 million budget, and a big disappointment that really sidetracked Carpenter to the point of it got him pulled off of his next project. And that is hard to believe today, but he never really recaptured fully this moment in time as far as getting a bigger budget under his belt from a studio. It was never quite the same, despite the success later on of They Live, which is one of my favorite movies ever. But that's where the cult status comes in, because critics and fans don't always get it right off the jump. VHS, home video, physical media, and cable TV gave this movie new life. So by the 1990s, horror magazines, fan conventions, and now, yes, even critics hailed it as a masterpiece. And it rightly so, because it is.
No, it's one of the great. I think it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made, if not one of the greatest movies ever made.
I completely agree.
Today, you have Criterion essays, beautiful 4K restorations. I have one right here, one of the best in existence. Countless filmmakers cite it. Like I said, the blood test scene been used over and over again. It influenced things from X-Files to The Mist, The Hateful Eight, all of that. You could find the things influence everywhere. There's so much trivia and fun facts behind this movie to get lost in forever. Carpenter kept the design of the alien a secret from the cast until the reveal shots so that he could get real reactions. That's really cool because you can't fake that, doesn't matter how great of an actor you are. The opening title, Burn Through, which is so iconic now, was filmed with an animation cell burning through black plastic. Carpenter considers it his favorite of his films, and you gotta love that because filmmakers are always hard on their films. So much good stuff comes in here. Countless documentaries, videos like this that dissect it, and we're just scratching the top of this. I mean, you could go on for hours and hours about who got infected first, the chain of being infected, all kinds of stuff. Was this shadow? No, it was the stuntman shadow to throw you off. You can talk about how the famous scene where the head detaches had to be reshot and redone because the whole place almost basically blew up because of the fumes from what Rob Bottin had to use. There's so much stuff that goes on, but that's what makes the thing bigger than a monster movie. It's a study in paranoia, tension, and identity and dread that feels just as sharp today as it did in 1982. This movie is a classic of all time. Now, I famously tell people this is a movie, as a massive horror fan, movie fan, a horror writer, filmmaker, director, editor of over 2 decades. This is a movie growing up that I refused to sit down and watch all the way through with my dad. Despite being a massive Carpenter fan, despite being a massive Kurt Russell fan, it just never stuck with me until in recent years when I revisited it, and now I cannot get enough. I deep dive into this movie all the time. I enjoy it. I love living in that space of trying to figure it out. I look forward to applying more of it later to other films that I do. I think it is an incredible story, an incredible character study of the human condition and what would happen to you for real in a situation like that. But I want to hear from you, and I want to have real discussion about who you think is infected and why. Give me a couple of examples. Who do you think is the thing? Do you think it's MacReady? Do you think it's Childs? Do you think it's both? Do you think it's neither? Let me know, and let's continue this deep dive discussion together. I love all of the talk about this. You cannot escape the thing.
What do we do?
Why don't we just wait here for a little while?
And that's what I got for you this time. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. I'm going to get into more of these deep dives of some of our favorite horror movies of all time. Halloween, They Live, From Beyond, Reanimator, Humanoids from the Deep. So many movies over time I'm going to get in. And you're going to get everything I know from both a fan and a horror filmmaker's perspective. If that's your jam, Please like and subscribe. It helps the channel. If you would like to join the channel, my Patreon link is below. You're going to get special extended versions of videos like this, uncensored videos, special members only videos, and of course, you're going to get your name in lights on every single video, and it helps out the channel so much. And on our way out, let's toast one final whiskey to John Carpenter, to Kurt Russell, to Keith David, to everyone involved. Rob Bottin, a special toast to The Thing, an all-time classic. I think I'll just sit here.